You wake up slowly, not because an alarm forced you out of sleep, but because your body naturally decides that the night is over and the world outside is safe enough to return to, and for a brief moment, there is no pressure, no schedule, no expectation waiting for you beyond the simple fact that you are alive and surrounded by people who have always been there with you. And this is how almost every human for nearly 300,000 years began their day. Not by checking messages or thinking about productivity, but by simply existing within a group where survival and belonging were the same thing. For most of human history, there was no such thing as waking up alone in a silent room, because humans did not live in separation. They lived in groups of 20, 30, sometimes 50 people, where every aspect of life was shared. Where you didn't have a private life and a public life, you only had life. One continuous experience shaped by firelight conversations, shared food, collective movement, and constant awareness that your survival depended not on what you achieved individually, but on how well you stayed connected to everyone around you. And when you compare that to modern life, the contrast becomes almost strange, because today you wake up in isolation. You spend most of your day interacting with systems instead of people, and even when you are surrounded by others, there is a subtle distance that never fully disappears, a quiet sense that everyone is living inside their own separate mental world, and yet your brain, biologically speaking, is still built for something completely different. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies discovered something surprising, that people who live closest to ancient human lifestyles do not spend most of their day working in the way we define work today. Instead, they spend a relatively small portion of time securing food or performing survival tasks, and the rest of their day unfolds into something far more fluid, something that looks less like productivity and more like simply being present with others, talking, laughing, resting, observing, and sharing life without the constant pressure of optimization or achievement. And this is where the real difference begins to appear. Because ancient humans did not measure their worth by output, they did not structure their lives around efficiency, and they did not divide their existence into working hours and personal hours. Instead, their lives flowed naturally between activity and rest, between movement and stillness, between survival and connection, and this rhythm created something that modern humans rarely experience without effort, a sense of belonging that was not optional, but built into every moment of their existence. There was no private suffering in the way we understand it today, because even pain was shared, even fear was collective, even uncertainty was experienced together. And when the sun went down and the fire became the center of life, something remarkable happened, because the focus of conversation shifted away from survival tasks and into stories, imagination, humor, memory, and meaning. And in those moments, human culture was not something written or recorded. It was something lived and passed directly between minds sitting in the same circle of light. At night, when the world outside became dark and unknown, ancient humans did not retreat into separate rooms with individual screens. Instead, they remained together, physically close, emotionally connected, and psychologically aligned in ways that modern environments rarely reproduce, and sleep itself was not a single isolated block of unconsciousness but often came in phases, with quiet waking periods in between where people would reflect, talk softly, or simply remain aware of the group around them without the pressure of productivity or time constraints. And when agriculture eventually arrived, everything began to change. Because for the first time, humans stopped moving with the natural flow of environment and instead started shaping the environment to produce surplus. And with surplus came ownership. With ownership came responsibility, and with responsibility came work that was no longer optional, but necessary for survival in an expanding and increasingly complex society. As populations grew, so did specialization, and gradually the human experience shifted from collective survival to individual responsibility, from shared existence to divided roles, from time being something you lived inside to something you managed, and eventually this led to the modern idea of jobs, schedules, obligations, and productivity as the primary structure of human life. And now, in the present day, you spend most of your waking life working, planning, or trying to optimize your future, while your ancient brain still carries the memory of a world where survival did not require separation, where belonging was automatic, and where time was not something you ran out of, but something you simply lived inside. So when people say ancient humans were happier, it is not because their lives were easier or more comfortable in the modern sense, but because their existence was more integrated, more socially connected, and less divided between who they were and what they had to do. And maybe that is the most uncomfortable realization of all, that happiness was not something they chased, it was something that naturally emerged from a life where being human and being together were the same thing. And perhaps that is why, even today, with all our technology, privacy, and independence, there is still a quiet feeling that something essential is missing, not because we are broken, but because somewhere deep inside, our brains still remember the firelight, the voices, and the feeling of never being alone.